It's time for another Right Royal Rundown, and today let's decide who was the worst king in medieval history. I'll give you the short list and you tell me who was the most rotten regent of the Middle Ages. And perhaps you have your own suggestions to add to this list. Let's find out who they were and how their rubbish reigns came to an end. King John of England. Even as a young man, John had a reputation for treachery, and he tried to seize the throne from his brother King Richard I when Richard was detained by the Holy Roman Emperor on the way back from a crusade. Luckily for Richard, his mom Eleanor of Aquitaine pawned the crown jewels to pay a ransom for Richard's release. When he got back to England, John then begged for forgiveness, and Richard did forgive him, and when Richard died with no children, John finally inherited the coveted crown. He married his own cousin Isabella, Countess of Gloucester, and then ditched her for the underage Isabella of Angoulême, who just happened to own some strategically placed French lands. But Isabella already had a fiancé who was very annoyed about all this, and the whole thing ended up in another war between England and France. King John lost many of his French lands. After failing in France, he faced multiple revolts in England and was forced by his nobles to sign the Magna Carta in 1215, which limited the power of the monarchy, giving naughty kings a slap on the wrist and reminding them that they do have to follow laws too. Not that this stopped King John from murdering and imprisoning family members, arguing with the Pope to the point that the king was excommunicated, and heavily taxing regions to make up for losses after failed wars. King John died of dysentery on the cusp of being defeated whilst fighting a civil war against his own barons, leaving his 9-year-old son King Henry III to take over the English throne. The barons decided that little Henry would be much easier to manage and they could all get behind that. King Charles VI of France. First they called him Charles the Beloved, but later they called him Charles the Mad. The reign of Charles VI was marked by episodes of insanity and psychotic episodes that led to significant political instability. Likely an inherited condition, his first episode occurred at age 24 and resulted in Charles attacking his own men and killing several of them. This was the first of many such mental health episodes. Sadly, King Charles would often not recognise his own wife and children. Sometimes he was convinced he was made of glass and had iron rods sewn into his clothes to protect him from shattering. Charles would run so wildly throughout his royal residence that entrances were walled up to prevent his escape. One year, Charles thought himself to be St. George, and another he refused to wash or change his clothes for 5 months. Due to his mental illness, Charles's reign would often operate under a regency, with his uncles and his wife holding power. Rivalries were rife and civil war broke out. Chaos and anarchy spread throughout France, and King Henry V of England took this opportunity to invade. Henry's success led to Charles's children being disinherited in favour of Henry, but don't worry, they fight back later. King Stephen of England. Stephen Blois was the grandson of William the Conqueror. He married the rich in her own right Matilda of Boulogne, making them one of the wealthiest power couples in England. In 1120, King Henry I of England's son and heir was drowned in the sinking of the White Ship. Stephen narrowly avoided drowning in the incident too, and he totally promised to support King Henry's daughter, the Empress Matilda, to ascend to the throne after Henry's death. However, when King Henry died, Stephen immediately went back on his word and rushed to claim the throne. He argued that this was necessary to preserve order, but instead this resulted in rebellion and a prolonged period of civil war in England, known as the Anarchy. The period saw significant lawlessness, destruction and disruption. Stephen really wanted his favourite son Eustace to inherit the English throne, but his own clergyman refused to back him up. Empress Matilda's son Henry Plantagenet received powerful support from the barons of England when he invaded in 1153, and after a trouncing, a peace deal was struck, recognising Henry as Stephen's heir. Emperor Wenceslaus IV, King of Bohemia and Germany, was not to be mistaken for the good King Wenceslaus of the Christmas song, who was literally a saint by comparison. Crowned as the King of Bohemia at 2 years old, Wenceslaus did at least have the guidance of his father, King Charles IV, who was the King of Germany for another 15 years or so. Charles IV died in 1378, leaving Wenceslaus to inherit Germany. The reign of King Wenceslaus, also named Wenceslaus the Idle, was marked by neglect of his duties and cruel cruelty. Legend has it that his first wife was mauled to death by one of his hunting hounds, but she was quickly replaced by one of her own cousins. An isolated drunkard, Wenceslaus's grip on power was tenuous, and he often came into conflict with his nobles, in particular his own family, who really had it in for him, especially his little brother Sigismund. Wenceslaus was imprisoned on 2 occasions. He was once arrested for torturing and drowning a high-ranking priest, John of Nepomuk. In 1400, Wenceslaus was deposed by his nobles on account of futility, idleness, negligence, and ignobility. He was replaced as King of Germany by preferred candidate Rupert III. King Henry VI of England ascended to the English throne at the age of just 9 months old, and shortly after also inherited the French throne. Often referred to as England's worst king, King Henry VI's reign saw the loss of English territories in France. Unlike a lot of kings, Henry did not like war and violence. He was timid, shy, and passive. As a ruler, he was weak and indecisive, and spent most of his reign being pushed about by other people. This was a time of unrest, of political factions and rebellions, and Henry lacked the ability or the ambition to put a stop to the chaos. In 1453, Henry suffered his first mental breakdown and was often left unresponsive in a catatonic state, leaving quarrelsome nobles to run wild and rivals to vie for power to run the country. Really, the only reason Henry was holding on to any power at all was because of his more than competent wife, Queen Margaret of Anjou. Instability and misrule eventually led to anarchy and infighting, and the beginning of the War of the Roses, which was an infamous series of civil wars for control of the throne of England. As power swapped back and forth, Henry was deposed in 1461 by crown contender King Edward IV. Then later in 1470, Henry was reinstated on the throne with the help of the Earl of Warwick, only for Edward to return to retake power soon afterwards. And Henry VI was locked up in the Tower of London. But wait, Henry has a son, 17-year-old Edward of Westminster, Prince of Wales. Surely he can take the throne and bring peace to the country. Unfortunately not. Edward killed Henry's only son in the Battle of Tewkesbury in 1471. Henry VI then mysteriously died whilst in Edward's care. King Louis II of Hungary. Unlike other young kings, Louis II of Hungary had a great start in life. No, not really, it was horrific. Due to a premature birth, medieval doctors kept Louis alive by slaughtering livestock and wrapping him in their warm carcasses, an early type of incubator, and quite the horrific way to enter into this world. Louis was crowned King of Hungary just 2 years later, and his ruling regents horribly neglected him. They spent his inherited riches and left Louis to pawn his own jewels so that he could buy food to survive. With little to no guidance, no wonder King Louis grew up to lack diplomatic understanding and financial management skills, taking bad advice, leaving guards unpaid, forts falling apart, and taxes uncollected, something the Ottoman Empire was more than happy to take advantage of. King Louis II's reign ended with the disastrous Battle of Mohacs, where Hungary's army was all but destroyed by the Ottoman army in just 2 hours. King Louis died while retreating when he fell backwards off his horse and drowned under the weight of his own armour. King Louis's lack of effective leadership contributed to the kingdom's vulnerability and subsequent division and occupation by the Ottomans and the Habsburgs, who were much better at taking the tribulations of the job on the chin, because thanks to inbreeding, their chins were massive. King Michael III of Byzantine. King Michael of Byzantine was also known as Michael the Drunkard. Michael was just 2 years old when he was crowned emperor. Michael's mother Theodora led his regency until 856, when young Michael, under the influence of, some may say led astray by, his favourite uncle Bardus, overthrew the regency and sent his mother and sisters off to a monastery. Michael was known for his habitual drunkenness and an obsession with chariot racing rather than ruling. Prone to squandering money, it was said that Michael also mocked the church. Emperor Michael remained under the strong influence of Uncle Bardus until the hot new courtier of the time, Basil the Macedonian, persuaded Michael that Bardus was conspiring against him, and so Michael allowed Basil to murder Bardus. But what goes around comes around, when later Basil murdered Emperor Michael as he lay in a drunken stupor. Guess who became the emperor after that? Actually kind of impressive considering that Basil was born a lowly peasant. King Æthelred II, also known as Æthelred the Unready. But what was he unready for? In Old English, unready actually meant poorly advised, which is funny because the name Æthelred means well advised. Another fantastic example of medieval humour. King Æthelred ascended to the English throne sometime between the ages of 9 and 12 years old, following the assassination of his half-brother, King Edward the Martyr, a murder that was possibly organised by Æthelred's own mother, but definitely undertaken by his household knights. It was unlikely that Æthelred himself had any involvement in this plot due to his age. In the year 1002, King Æthelred ordered the mass killing of Danish settlers in England, known as the St. Brice's Day Massacre. He ordered his army over to peaceful settlements to murder men, women and children. Although Æthelred termed this a most just extermination, this was not something that King Sweyn Forkbeard of Denmark agreed upon, especially as it was said that Sweyn's own sister was killed in the incident. And so King Sweyn spent years raiding and pillaging England in retaliation, and invaded in 1013 to become the new King of England. Æthelred fled, although he did return to reign for a further 2 years after Sweyn's death in 1014. So who do you think was the worst medieval king? And what do you think of this one? If you like historic lists, check out this video about Queen Elizabeth I's lovers. Or if you want to hear a wild story, there's this video about how a sausage brought down the Catholic Church in Switzerland.